I'm using the police here. What's the problem? My God, do it with an animal. Is that human person?
They had located what they believed to be a dead female.
Right when she came into the restaurant. Little I know, that was the last time. One way or the other, I was gonna get answers.
Video will make or break the case. Everything about his behavior and the facts is suspicious and establishes him as the prime suspect.
It was shocking. I was blown away.
What clothes do you want in here?
Shove them all in there.
28-year-old Laura Pitcher is helping her friend Angela Crippen move home.
I can't think of a time that I needed help and she wasn't there. She was always there for whatever I needed. I met Laura in first grade. I was best friends with Laura for about 21 years.
Some of these clothes are older than you.
Yeah.
She was very personable, always funny. She always kept me laughing from the day I met her. She was very outgoing. Even with her disability, it never stopped her.
Laura was born with a deformity in her left arm. She had no elbow. Where her elbow would have been, her thumb and 2 fingers were. She progressed through her life from hating it to accepting it. I would almost say rejoiced in it. It was part of her unique persona.
Laura grew up in Michigan. She moved to Sebring, Florida when she was 26.
She went to Florida because her grandmother was getting older and couldn't take care of herself. So Laura, the big heart she has, quit her job, went down to Florida to be with her grandmother.
Do you remember this scarf?
Oh my God.
Anytime I needed her for the kids, she would pick them up and take them shopping or come over and cook dinner. Laura was the kindest person you would ever meet.
I'll finish this in the morning. Thanks for helping.
I never would have guessed that would be the last time I saw her.
Tampa 911. I'm using the police here. What's the problem?
It's the morning of Friday, October 19th, 2018. The Tampa Police Department receives a 911 call. The location is a Latin food restaurant.
Used to people from here throw garbage in the back of the store. There's a lot of flies around and I told my boss.
The 911 caller reports a foul odor coming from underneath a headboard next to a dumpster in the restaurant parking lot.
He thought it was an animal, so he get a stick and pull up a little bit of the and he ran to the store and told me, it's a human person for the police.
They had located what they believed to be a dead female underneath the headboard.
They're coming. Stay on the phone with me till the police get there, okay? Okay.
Detective Cholmick of Tampa Bay PD arrives at the scene.
The victim was found laying face down. She was partially nude, and there had been a plastic bag placed over her before the headboard had then been placed over the body as well. She was found in a dress. However, the dress had been pulled down below her breast. She also had a pair of shorts that appeared to have been removed from her and left between her legs. There's a purse strap that's tied around her hands in order to bind her hands behind her back. Inside the dumpster, they found a clear plastic bag that contained personal items, most important of which were pieces of mail, as well as a wallet that ultimately had a Florida identification card. The lady was identified as Laura Pitcher. We established that she's not actually local to the Tampa area and lives in a town that's about 2 hours away called Sebring, Florida.
Why is she here?
It's not a place that you would commonly go back and forth from. Further investigation reveals that Ms. Pitcher has a pickup truck. It's a silver Toyota Tundra that she is known to drive.
Laura's pickup is missing from the crime scene.
It's possible that she came to Tampa in that truck. The truck is entered into law enforcement databases, reported as a stolen truck in case any law enforcement officer anywhere should find it.
Investigators interview the restaurant's manager.
The owners of the business had had the parking lot cleaned 2 days before on Wednesday. The body is then found on Friday morning. We know that this body has to be placed there somewhere between Wednesday and Friday.
Sweep the area for cameras.
They're looking to see if there's video that documents whatever may have happened. Surveillance footage will typically make or break a case, but Tampa police officers were not able to find anything of value regarding the placement of the body or who might have been involved.
Meanwhile, the medical examiner performs the autopsy on Laura's body.
She had clear marks in the area of her neck and throat that showed that she had been strangled by some sort of thin object like a rope.
And other signs on Laura's body help to pinpoint when she died.
By the time the body had been discovered, it had entered decomposition, and that compromised any chance of discovering whether or not there was any sort of DNA that would have substantiated some sort of sexual crime. The skin was discolored, and it was clear that the body had been on the ground at least for several hours, if not a couple days.
The medical examiner concludes that Laura died on Wednesday, 2 days before she was found. Police 1,200 miles away in Michigan break the news to Laura's family.
We'll remember that forever.
What's going on?
I knew when an officer comes to your door at 8:30 at night, something not good was up. When he said that she's a homicide victim, that's when I kind of lost it.
It was shocking. I was blown away.
Oh, it was just overwhelming. I mean, that's something no parent should ever have to hear.
She was so sweet, always smiling. I loved her so much that I can't imagine who would want to kill Laura.
I found out from her father. I don't believe I ever cried harder in my life than he told me. I lost my mom when I was a kid, and I don't think I cried as hard as I did when I heard the news of Laura.
Laura's parents make the 20-hour drive from Michigan to Sebring to grant investigators access to Laura's trailer.
We'd driven all night. I had opened the doors, and they were looking to see if it was involved in any part of the crime.
They came and went through the house to see if anything was out of ordinary.
They found nothing there whatsoever.
Nothing out of place here.
They checked to see if the truck was anywhere to be found, but the truck was not found there.
Investigators piece together Laura's movements before her murder.
There doesn't appear to be any clear idea as to why Laura is in town. Her appearance in Tampa is completely unexpected.
Detective Cholnick secures the records for Laura's cell.
There was phone calls between the hours of roughly 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. When she stops being active on the cell phone, that's obviously an indication of when something may have gone wrong.
The records reveal that Laura called a man named Vidal Cortez twice on Wednesday morning.
Have you ever heard of the name Vidal Cortez?
Laura's friends reveal that he is Laura's on-off boyfriend.
Do you know how we could get a hold of him? No. That's fine.
Before investigators can track down Vidal,
You get a break. the Toyota Tundra is reported as being involved in an incident here in Tampa.
Laura's truck has been seen at a convenience store in the city.
We got a sighting of the pickup.
Detectives race to the store, 3 miles from where Laura's body was discovered.
You made a report about a man in a Toyota truck?
Yeah.
We're gonna need to see that footage. Started when he arrives.
Hold it. Zoom in there.
That's her truck. Okay, keep playing.
Who are you? Is that the guy you reported?
Yeah, that's him.
A man gets out of the passenger side of Laura Pitcher's pickup. Someone else is driving her vehicle.
Okay, keep playing. He's keeping his head low. He knows he's on camera. Can you pick him up inside the store?
Punch it on his face. Anything clearer?
It's the best I can do.
The image is too grainy to make out his face.
Why'd you report him?
I've had a lot of theft lately, and this guy was acting kind of weird.
Follow him back out the store.
The man returns to the passenger side of Laura's truck. There's still no clear view of the driver on the CCTV.
Did you see the driver?
No.
We're gonna need a copy of this.
Barely an hour later, patrol officers locate Laura's pickup.
It was a pursuit by the Tampa Police Department. The truck was eventually found on the roadway. It looked like it had been involved in a minor accident. The person in the truck identified himself as Calvin Gary, who's seated in the passenger seat. There's nobody in the driver's seat. There's a pair of shoes that are left behind. And it's obvious that the driver of the truck has fled. Now they start searching Mr. Gary. He's wearing an ankle monitor because he's on probation. The truck is impounded by the Tampa Police Department and collected as potential evidence.
Calvin Gary sustains minor injuries in the crash. Investigators question him at the hospital.
We know the truck doesn't belong to you. What were you doing inside it?
Mr. Gary says that the truck has been in the possession of somebody he knows by the nickname of Hot. Hot had recently arrived in the area and they were going to do a beer run, as he calls it, at the convenience store and try to get some beer.
How did Hot get the truck?
He doesn't know where the truck comes from.
Have you ever seen this woman?
He says he doesn't know anything about Laura. Has no idea about what happened to her.
What's Hot look like?
He's able to provide a sort of general description. He tells the law enforcement that he's a male, he's African American, and that he's relatively short.
You know where we can find him?
Gary reveals Hot is homeless and hangs around a neighborhood in North Tampa. Investigators race to the location to find him.
So the detectives looked around and discovered a short African-American male hiding in sort of a bushy area out of view.
Can you come on out here and speak with us, please? Come on, let's go.
He had on a shirt, a pair of pants, didn't have any shoes on.
What's her name?
The suspect is uncooperative. He won't even identify himself at the request of law enforcement.
All right, come on over to the vehicle with us, please.
They believe him to be Hot based on the description by Calvin Gary. This is obviously someone they really want to talk to.
Seat.
Law enforcement uses what's called rapid ID. They can take like a fingerprint off the person and feed it into the system.
Hot's real name is revealed. Gary Danielle.
Mr. Danielle had an extensive criminal history. He'd actually been to prison 3 times previously. He'd been there for drug dealing, drug possession, robbery, and other violent crimes.
You're from Sebring.
Mr. Danielle is from the Sebring area, which is the same hometown that Laura is from. They believe that he's the driver of Laura's truck, given the fact that he is suspiciously not wearing any shoes when shoes are left inside the truck. So all of those things raise a tremendous amount of red flags for him as a suspect. There isn't a sufficient amount of evidence to charge him with this homicide, so he's released, but he remains a person of interest.
You're free to go. Come on.
Investigators switch their focus to Calvin Gary, the man that Gary Danielle drove in Laura's truck on a beer run.
Because Calvin Gary was wearing an ankle monitor, it's possible for law enforcement to go back and track his movement.
I've got Calvin Gary's GPS.
It confirms that he's never in Sebring, Florida, and also that he's not at the scene of the dumpster where Laura's body is ultimately found.
He's not our guy.
Calvin Gary is removed as a possible suspect. He has pretty much an airtight alibi thanks to the ankle monitor.
Meanwhile, detectives trace Laura's on-off boyfriend, Vidal Cortez.
I'm a detective with Tampa PD. When did you last hear from Laura Peter?
Vidal explains he was working in another county at the time of Laura's murder. That rules him out as a suspect. But he does know that Laura visited the Wild Hog Bar in Sebring on the evening of Tuesday, October 16th.
Okay, great. It's a big help.
Investigators head over to talk to the bar's manager, Joel Crosby.
I'm a detective from Tampa. This is my partner. Do you recognize this woman?
Yes. That's Laura.
Laura and I were friends through the neighborhood inn. She came in for a bite to eat all the time.
I heard what happened.
But she felt like part of the family to me, because I took this one personal. I wanted to know. I wanted answers. And I was damned. I was gonna get some answers, one way or the other. I was gonna get answers.
When's the last time Laura was in?
Tuesday night, 16th.
She came into the restaurant dressed to the nines. She looked great coming in. And she had that smile and her makeup on, and little I know, that was the last time.
Do the cameras work?
Yeah.
The detectives were able to discover that the business had surveillance cameras inside that record what's transpiring inside the bar.
We need to see the footage from those.
The detectives wanted to get the video, and we just rolled back from the night that she came in.
That's her. Zoom in.
Laura's wearing the same dress that she's ultimately found in when her body is discovered.
Can you show me the angle from behind the bar?
She sat there. She didn't have any alcohol or anything like that. Waitress that was working at the time gave her her beverage and brought her dinner to her. And the two of them were chatting away.
There's nobody bothering her or anything that aroused suspicion.
She only talks to the waitress? No patrons?
She was sitting at the bar alone, and the only conversation she had was with the waitress until it was time to go.
What time did she leave?
She probably stayed there, I'd say it's a matter of hours, and then she left, probably close to 11 p.m. at night.
Any idea where she went?
She was going downtown to meet the other girlfriends and whoever else might be going.
A patron later revealed to Joel that he'd seen Laura with a man 4 hours after she left the Wild Hog.
He said, I saw it with Shorty. I said, Shorty? Who's Shorty? He says, little dude.
What time was that at?
About 2:45 in the morning, he saw her at the convenience store gas station on the other side of town. And happened to see Laura sitting in her pickup truck.
So this was Wednesday morning?
She stayed in the truck. He had the conversation with Shorty inside the store. And he said Laura and Shorty left together.
And she was okay at that point?
Yeah.
Did he say anything else?
The eyewitness doesn't describe Laura as in distress or crying or injured or anything at that point.
You've been a great help. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Investigators head to the gas station.
Hi there. We need to take a look at your security footage.
Yeah. She woke up last Wednesday morning. Started 2:30.
Show me the camera that covers the cash register. Stop there. I know you.
It becomes fairly clear that Gary Danielle is inside the gas station. The eyewitness is there with him. They're clearly having some sort of pleasant conversation.
Gary Danielle buys some tobacco, then leaves the store.
Now switch to the camera that covers the outside.
And that's the witness walking to his car.
There's Laura's pickup. Isn't up in the left-hand corner there? Okay, punch in and play it again.
The footage shows Laura's truck reversing out of the parking spot before it pulls onto the highway.
There it goes.
The truck is there, but you can't specifically tell whether or not she's inside of it and what she's doing inside of it. So all you can see is the truck. But all of this corroborates the story told by the eyewitness. who said he specifically saw Mr. Danielle and Ms. Pitcher together at that gas station in the Sebring area on the early morning of Wednesday. Mr. Danielle is now certainly the suspect, confirmed by the fact that just 2 days after Laura's body turns up, Mr. Danielle is now driving the truck in Tampa.
Meantime, Laura's parents lay their daughter to rest.
We had had her body cremated, and then we took her ashes and went to the Peace River.
Laura had put Grandma's ashes into the river. Of course, we thought Laura'd be someday putting our ashes there in the Peace River. We sure didn't think we'd be putting them in.
And Art asked me to step up and do the honors. And I took off the boots, rolled up the pants, and I walked into the water, and I put some of the ashes on a little raft and let the ashes go in the stream.
It's always talked about swimming with the dolphins. So the Peace River empties into the ocean. That's a place where the dolphins swim up in there. And we always said, there you go, Laura. You're gonna swim with the dolphins.
And I whispered to her, "We're gonna get him." I said, "We're gonna get him." I vowed to make sure we got him.
Investigators analyze the items recovered from the dumpster for evidence that connects Gary Danielle to Laura's murder.
There was an ATM receipt that was partially torn, but that ATM receipt had information contained on it that allowed law enforcement to pinpoint to one particular ATM at a gas station in Hillsborough County near Tampa.
A tag reader near to the gas station captures Laura's truck at 3:30 p.m. on Wednesday, 12 hours after she was last seen in Sebring.
I think I've got something. Let's go.
And so law enforcement goes to Circle K where the ATM is located.
The gas station CCTV could reveal who dumped Laura's body in Tampa.
We need to take a look at your security footage from last Wednesday.
Okay, start it from 3 p.m. We're looking for a silver Toyota pickup truck. Hold it. That's Laura's pickup. Okay, keep playing. Have you got any other angles on this truck? Okay, keep playing. I need to see who gets out.
Gary Danielle.
Okay, switch to the interior.
Danielle withdraws cash from the ATM. He then buys a soda. and leaves the store.
Switch back to the exterior. Stop there and punch in. Can you see anyone in there with Gary?
Can't see her.
What's not seen is Miss Pitcher. She's not seen inside the store. She's not seen outside the store. She's not seen in the truck. No point is Miss Pitcher anywhere to be seen. By this point, we're thinking that Laura Pitcher is already dead. He has her in the back of the truck, and that he's just on the way ultimately to the place where he's going to dump the body.
Investigators are building their case against Gary Danielle when he makes a surprise visit to the police department.
Mr. Danielle chooses to show up at Tampa Police Headquarters on his own, unexpectedly, saying he wants to talk to Detective Cholnick. Not because he wants to talk about the homicide or about Miss Pitcher. Mr. Danielle is worried that he's going to be charged for maybe fleeing from law enforcement.
How did you guys come to have the truck?
I came up on the truck because I seen the keys in the truck.
Okay.
And I didn't see nobody around it, so I just drove the truck. That's the only thing I did.
Who does it belong to? I don't have any idea. Was there anything strange about the truck when you found it? Nope, everything was totally fine.
Only thing we did beer runs. And we was like riding around and we got pulled over.
How long had you been in that truck? Like how many days?
I can't even say.
You're not sure how many days?
No, man, I can't.
Okay.
Trained detectives know to work into the matter slowly. They don't just jump out and say, do you know Laura Pitcher? Did you kill her? They establish little facts piece by piece.
Have you left at all from Tampa once you came here?
No.
No? Haven't gone anywhere? Not back to Sebring, nowhere else? Alright. Let me show you a picture. Does this girl look familiar to you?
Now, what is we getting at?
We're getting at the fact that that truck actually belongs to a girl from Sebring, right where you're from.
He says, no, I don't know her. They ask him, did you ever encounter her while you were in Sebring? No, he doesn't know her from Sebring.
Okay, I got you on video. At the Shell station in Sebring last week. Not in Tampa. Okay, in her truck. With her. And ultimately I find her like this in Tampa. How did we go from she's alive with you in Sebring to she's not alive here in Tampa?
I don't know where we going with this, and I don't want to say nothing, get myself in trouble. I've been truthful.
Ultimately, he decides he doesn't want to say anything further, and that's the end of that. Everything about his behavior and the facts is suspicious and establishes him as the prime suspect.
But detectives lack the physical evidence that will prove to a jury that Danielle murdered Laura.
There is a set period of time in which a person must go to trial. That clock starts ticking when the arrest is conducted. As law enforcement in this case is still waiting for forensic evidence to come in, they're going to sit and they're going to wait for those results to come in before an arrest is ultimately conducted.
Prosecutors can't risk going to trial with a weakened case, so they decide to let Gary Danielle go.
We don't want to give dangerous people the opportunity to escape and avoid prosecution. Sure, it's something that we worry about, but in this case, it's the choice that we had to make.
The forensics tests reveal drops of Laura's blood on the back seat of her pickup.
And so based on that, Laura's body is likely in the back seat of the truck at some point after she's been killed and would have been bleeding, leaving her blood in the back seat area of the truck.
Investigators receive a forensics report on the items recovered from Laura's body.
Look at this.
We get DNA off of the strap that is used to bind the victim's hands when the body is recovered. And that DNA is matched to Gary Danielle.
The forensic evidence is building against Gary Danielle.
What is also found is Gary Danielle's DNA underneath Laura's fingernails.
Better.
With the DNA, the surveillance video, there is more than enough at this point to go ahead and proceed with charges.
U.S. Marshals swoop on an empty apartment in Tampa. They break down the door to arrest their suspect.
The defendant didn't say anything at that point. He's just exercising his right to remain silent. He's not saying anything.
I was just glad that he was captured.
Justice was going to be served.
How wonderful.
Gary Danielle is charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and theft of a motor vehicle. Once those charges have been filed, he proceeds to court.
Prosecutors build a timeline of Laura's last hours.
Based on the evidence, we believe that Laura Pitcher was in Sebring, Florida on the night of Tuesday. She had been at the Wild Hog, and at some point she had left that location.
Just after 11 p.m., Laura heads to downtown Sebring. There she parties at a bar with her girlfriends.
In the early hours of Wednesday morning, she came into contact with Gary Danielle.
Investigators believe Laura agreed to give Danielle a ride, possibly in exchange for cash.
Where you headed? Gary Danielle has never opened his mouth to tell us what really transpired that night. We don't have a clear picture on exactly why he was hanging out with Miss Pitcher, where they were going, what they were doing. What we do know is that they ended up at a gas station where the eyewitness specifically observed Miss Pitcher still alive on Wednesday morning in the pickup truck, uninjured and unharmed.
Within hours, Danielle attacks Laura in the back of her pickup.
Laura Pitcher was killed by ligature strangulation. Pressure was applied until she chokes to death. Where that truck was at the moment that the life went out of her is uncertain.
Prosecutors find no evidence of a sexual motive for Laura's murder. 12 hours after Laura's truck was last seen in Sebring, CCTV captures it at a gas station 25 miles outside Tampa.
Mr. Danielle goes into a gas station out in the Plant City area near the county line where he uses the ATM, creating the receipt that is ultimately found.
Danielle drives on to Tampa. He hides Laura's body next to a dumpster in a restaurant parking lot. She's found 2 days later.
Surveillance footage is very important because it undercuts the story that he tells. He says he had nothing to do with this. The fact that we could put Miss Pitcher and put the defendant together, he was driving around in Laura's truck hours before she is dead, is a huge part of showing that Gary Danielle, and only Gary Danielle, is to answer for this crime.
On August 24th, 2021, Gary Danielle accepts a plea deal with Florida prosecutors.
He entered a plea of guilty to murder in the second degree. He was ultimately sentenced to 30 years in prison.
He got 30 years, which isn't enough as far as I'm concerned. He killed a 28-year-old woman. So that's not fair.
I'm sure we could all agree it wasn't enough, but hopefully he won't see life outside of bars again.
It's had a great impact. Losing a child is not an easy thing to do.
I miss her laugh. I miss her dad. I miss her. Oh, so many things. Life's not fair. That's one thing we learn.
Why such a beautiful person had to meet with that end is beyond my comprehension.
It begins with a whisper, the kind that slides through the cracks of an old hospital room, quiet but heavy enough to change everything. London, 2001. A man dying of lung cancer asks to speak to a priest. He says he wants to clear his conscience. No one expects what comes next. Between shallow breaths, he confesses to something buried 24 years deep, something the city had almost forgotten: a murder, a disappearance, a case that froze in time. "It was me," he says. "I never meant to kill her." The nurse freezes. The priest feels the air drop. Somewhere in the distance, the city hums on, unaware that one of its oldest ghosts is about to wake again. Back then, it was the kind of case that never made sense. June 12, 2001, London's East End near Shoreditch. A 23-year-old woman named Emily Carter vanished on her way home from a late shift at a small cafe on Brick Lane. Cameras caught her leaving at 11:42 p.m., her coat wrapped tight against the drizzle, a small silver bracelet glinting under the streetlight. She turned the corner. Then she was gone. No struggle, no scream. Just silence. A clean erasure. When police arrived, all they found was her bag, unzipped lipstick, crushed inside, and her phone dead at 1% still warm. The news spread like fire through the neighborhood. Cold case, the tabloids would later call it. But in those first hours, no one could believe it had gone cold so fast. The investigation started the next morning. Detectives canvassed the area door to door, every flat, every alley. Brick Lane was a labyrinth of smells and shadows. Then spices sweat old brick dust, and every corridor looked the same after dark. Witnesses claimed they saw Emily walking with someone, maybe a man in a hooded jacket, but descriptions changed with every retelling. Some said tall, others said thin. One shopkeeper swore he saw her talking to someone in a car, but the cameras on that street had been out for weeks. The grainy footage that remained was useless. 2 blurry figures, 1 streetlight flickering, then static. No plate number, no face, no clue. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into years, and the city did what it always does: it forgot. But for Emily's mother, forgetting was never an option. Margaret Carter, 61, now still lived in the same semi-detached house in Hackney. Every night she left the porch light on, as if that tiny circle of light could guide her daughter home. Reporters came and went. Detectives' retired files collected dust. The case became one more folder in a basement archive labeled Unsolved. The years stripped the urgency from the story, leaving behind only the ache. Until that whisper in the hospital room. Until a dying man decided to speak. His name was William Billy Hargreaves, a factory mechanic who'd lived his whole life 3 miles from where Emily vanished. To the nurses, he was just another old man fading into morphine dreams. But in his youth, Billy had a record: assault, petty theft, drunken fights. Nothing that screamed killer, but enough to leave a shadow. When he began confessing, the priest thought it was fever. "She wasn't supposed to die," Billy murmured. "It was an accident. I panicked." The priest, shaken, alerted the police. Within hours, detectives from the Metropolitan Cold Case Unit were standing beside the hospital bed recorders, ready, faces pale. And for the first time in 2 decades, Emily Carter's name echoed again in official air. Billy spoke of a night soaked in rain. He said he met her near the old rail bridge, offered her a lift. She refused. They argued. "She pushed me," he said. "I pushed back. She fell, hit her head. Panic. Darkness. I didn't mean it. I just wanted her to stop screaming." His voice trembled. He claimed he hid her body near an abandoned warehouse by the river under concrete slabs laid before construction. The place had since been redeveloped modern apartments, now luxury glass and steel standing on ground that might still hide her bones. The detectives exchanged glances. Every word he spoke matched the geography of the old file. It sounded real. Too real. The next morning, crime scene units descended on the site. It was eerie modern residents staring from balconies as police taped off the courtyard. Beneath the polished floor of a parking structure, ground-penetrating radar detected something an anomaly, small but dense. Within hours, the drill cut through concrete that hadn't seen daylight in 24 years. And there it was, a fragment of fabric, a trace of bone, a silver bracelet, still intact, the one Emily wore the night she vanished, the same one that shimmered on that last piece of CCTV. It was enough. The case was no longer cold, but nothing prepared anyone for what the DNA results would reveal. The lab results confirmed the remains belonged to Emily Carter, but the DNA also showed something else: male genetic material embedded in the fibers of her jacket. It wasn't Billy's, not even close. The confession had opened the door, but it didn't fit the lock. Billy had known details no outsider could guess, but his story didn't match the evidence. The investigators were caught between truth and fabrication. Had he lied, or was there more to the story than he remembered? The dying man's pulse flickered on the monitor as detectives leaned in. If it wasn't you, one of them whispered, then who was it? Billy's lips moved. His last words barely audible. "I wasn't alone." And then the line went flat. For days, London buzzed with the news. Cold case cracked. Deathbed confession exposes hidden accomplice. Headlines screamed, reporters swarmed. But behind the frenzy, detectives dug deeper. The original investigation files were reopened, cross-checked with old phone records, vehicle registrations, even payroll data from Billy's old factory. Patterns emerged. On the night Emily disappeared, Billy wasn't working alone. There was another man on shift, David Cross's supervisor, a name that appeared once in the 2001 witness statements, then vanished. He'd moved out of London months after the disappearance, changed jobs, changed his name, disappeared into anonymity. When police tracked him down in Manchester, he refused to speak. No comment, no denial, but something in his eyes told them the past had caught up. Meanwhile, Margaret Carter was called to the station. After 24 years, she would finally bring her daughter home. The box they handed her was small, too small. Inside a few bones, a bracelet, and a photo from the original file. She didn't cry. She just stared the way people do when pain has carved too deep to show itself anymore. Outside, the reporters waited, but she said nothing. In the drizzle, the city felt heavy again, as if the rain itself remembered. Back at headquarters, detectives pieced the fragments together. Emily's phone records showed a call made just minutes before she vanished to a number registered under a temporary SIM card purchased at a corner shop near Billy's old workplace, the same shop where David Cross had cashed checks that week. CCTV from a nearby ATM, long thought useless, was enhanced with new AI technology revealing two figures standing by a car, one matching Billy's build, the other broader, older. It was never just one man. It was two. The case that had haunted London for 2 decades had always been missing its second half. But the evidence was thin. No physical trace of David at the burial site. No confession, and with Billy dead, the story was a jigsaw with missing corners. Detectives could feel the clock ticking, the weight of a community demanding closure. "We can't charge shadows," one of them muttered. Yet the feeling persisted. This was bigger than anyone had thought. There were whispers of a cover-up, of someone protecting someone. Old officers who had worked the original case began to receive anonymous letters typed unsigned. "You're digging in the wrong place." She wasn't the only one, the kind of threats that come from people who still have something to lose. In pubs across East London, people began telling the story again. The girl who disappeared, the man who confessed, the other man who never did. Urban legends merged with fact until no one could tell them apart. Some swore Emily had been seen on the riverbank days after she vanished. Others claimed her ghost still haunted the new apartments built over her grave. The truth has always remained buried beneath concrete, beneath memory, beneath time itself. And yet something about Billy's last words lingered. I wasn't alone. Not a plea, not an excuse, almost a warning. Detectives replayed the recording again and again, listening for a tone, a hint, a name hidden between breaths. But all they heard was fear. Whatever had happened that night wasn't just an accident gone wrong. It was something planned, something that required silence, and that silence had held for 24 years. Now, as the autumn rain sweeps through London again, the investigation stands on a knife's edge. The cold case is officially solved. But unofficially, it's only begun. Somewhere out there, someone still walks free carrying the secret that Billy took to the grave. And in the quiet streets of Shoreditch, when the night falls and the wind moves through the old alleys, people say you can still hear her footsteps, the last sound before everything went dark. The news hit like thunder across the city. Cold case solved after 2 decades. But inside Scotland Yard, no one was celebrating. Something about the confession didn't sit right. Too neat. Too rehearsed, too convenient for a man seconds from death. The detectives who reopened the Carter file had seen too many lies told by men afraid to die alone. And the question lingered if Billy Hargreaves wasn't the only one there that night. Who was he covering for? Detective Inspector Eleanor Shaw, the lead on the re-examination, stood by the window of her office watching the drizzle coat the glass in streaks of silver. She'd been just a rookie constable in 2001, barely out of academy, when Emily Carter disappeared. She remembered the case vividly, the chaos, the media frenzy, the helplessness. It was the case that shaped her career, the one that taught her that sometimes justice sleeps longer than the dead. Now, 24 years later, she had a second chance. And she wasn't about to let ghosts win again. The first thing she did was reopen the physical evidence. Boxes retrieved from the basement archives, yellowing files, brittle photographs, plastic evidence bags fogged with time. Inside one of them, Emily's belongings, her wallet, her cracked phone, her lipstick, and that silver bracelet now blackened at the clasp. But something new caught Eleanor's eye. A faint smudge on the inside of the phone case, too clean to be random, too deliberate to be unnoticed. Under ultraviolet light, it glowed faintly, almost like the edge of a fingerprint partially preserved by years of compression. DNA labs had advanced far beyond 2001 standards. What was once useless might now speak. She sent it for reanalysis, her pulse steady but her mind racing. Meanwhile, the task force began re-interviewing old witnesses. Most had moved, aged, forgotten. But memories have a way of resurfacing when names return to headlines. One man, Ian Walden, a night security guard at the old warehouses near the river, came forward. He said he'd always felt uneasy about that night. Around midnight, he'd seen a van parked illegally by the loading dock, unmarked, white lights off. Inside, 2 silhouettes, one smoking, one pacing. I thought it was kids, he told detectives, but one of them, he had this limp. Left leg, a slight drag. I remember because I had one too. The note went into the file. Small detail. Meaningless until they looked into David Cross. In his old employment records dated 2001, Cross had suffered a minor injury at work, left ankle fracture, partial recovery. He walked with a subtle limp ever since. Suddenly, the puzzle edges began to fit. Billy's confession wasn't the story, it was the cover. He had been there, yes, but not as the killer. He was the accomplice, the cleaner, the one told to stay quiet. The real monster had been standing behind him all along. But when police visited David Cross again, he was gone. The Manchester flat empty, stripped. A neighbor said he'd moved out days before in a hurry. He'd left no forwarding address, no trace. It was as if he had melted into thin air. The press didn't know it yet, but inside the Metropolitan Police, the tension was palpable. They were hunting a ghost within a ghost story. Eleanor sat in the evidence room long after everyone had gone home, staring at Emily's photo. Blonde hair, kind eyes, the faintest smile. Not the kind of face that belonged in morgue photos or news archives. She thought of Margaret Carter, the way the mother's hands trembled when she received that box. Eleanor promised herself she would not let that box be the end of it. There had to be more. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. The lab report had come through. The DNA on the phone case was male. It matched no one in the database, but it carried a partial familial link, one already stored from previous convictions. Eleanor's breath caught. The match led not to David Cross himself, but to someone related. His brother, Mark Cross, deceased in 2015, armed robbery gone wrong. Mark's DNA had been logged after his arrest years earlier, which meant that either David had left his own trace or someone close to him had touched Emily's phone. Either way, the line of blood connected. The next morning, the story broke wide open. Newspapers ran it in bold, confession questioned second man, linked to 2001 cold case. The headlines screamed justice, but for Eleanor, it only meant noise. Public pressure. Every reporter wanted the new suspect's face, his name, his history. But she knew better. The louder the city got, the quieter the truth became. They found the van within 48 hours buried under a false registration abandoned in a scrapyard on the outskirts of Leeds. The VIN matched the one from a parking ticket issued 2 days before Emily vanished. Inside, rust decay, 1,000 fingerprints lost to time. But beneath the driver's seat, something strange. A small metallic keychain shaped like a compass. Engraved initials E.C. Emily Carter. The one her mother said she carried everywhere. How did it end up there, and why was the van hundreds of miles away? Forensics went to work scraping fibers, lifting traces. On the fabric beneath the steering wheel, blood microscopic but present. It matched Emily. For 24 years, her blood had been riding along unnoticed inside a shell of rust and dust. Now it spoke louder than any confession. Detectives traced the van's ownership history, and the trail led to a company dissolved in 2002, managed by David Cross. The circle tightened, but every time they got closer, something pushed back. Records missing, files deleted, calls unreturned. Someone had scrubbed his past clean, and they'd done it well. Eleanor began to suspect he hadn't vanished, he'd been helped to disappear. Rumors spread in the department that Cross had once been an informant. That back in 2001 he'd supplied tips to undercover units investigating illegal labor rings in East London. If true, it would explain why his name was quietly dropped from the Carter file back then. Protection, not oversight. But it would also mean one thing someone inside had known. Someone had chosen silence over truth. Eleanor brought this theory to her superior Chief Superintendent Hayes. He didn't like it. Too messy, too dangerous. "We can't start accusing our own people," he said. "Stick to the evidence." But she could see it in his eyes, he knew. He'd been there in 2001. He'd signed some of those original reports. Maybe he'd buried the lead himself. The air between them turned cold. "Be careful what you dig up, Inspector," he warned. "Some graves aren't meant to be opened." But Eleanor didn't stop. She pulled the internal communication logs from 2001, the ones that still existed. Late-night calls between units. Encrypted messages, unexplained transfers of evidence. One in particular stood out, a call logged just hours after Emily's disappearance from an unregistered line to Hayes's office. The caller, ID D. Cross. The timing too precise to ignore. She printed it, slipped it into her coat pocket, and walked out into the night rain, lashing the city like needles. Meanwhile, the press painted Cross as a phantom, a man who'd slipped through the cracks of time. The one who got away, they called him. Conspiracy blogs took over, spinning theories, cover-ups, corrupt cops, even secret rings trafficking victims through the East End. The truth was simpler, darker, quieter. A girl trusted the wrong man. A system failed to see what was right in front of it. And now, decades later, both were coming back to haunt them. Then an unexpected message arrived. An email anonymous sent to Eleanor's personal account. Subject line, "You're not the first to look for him." Attached a single photograph, grainy, surveillance-like, taken just a week earlier in Brighton. A man sitting at a cafe table, older, now gray at the temples, but unmistakably David Cross. The timestamp read 09:42 a.m., 3 days after he'd supposedly vanished from Manchester. Her heart pounded as she zoomed in. On the table beside him, an oxygen tank, the kind used for chronic lung patients, and next to it a pack of cigarettes. A cruel contradiction. She sent the photo to the facial recognition unit. The results came back in minutes. 98% match. David Cross was alive, and he was dying. Within hours, surveillance teams were dispatched to Brighton. The flat he'd rented was small, facing the sea curtains drawn. When the door was finally breached, the smell of decay hit first medicine salt air mold. Cross lay on a cot, eyes sunken, a half-written letter beside him. On the desk, piles of old newspaper clippings, Emily Carter's face staring from every one of them. The letter was addressed to whom it may concern. It began simply, "I never wanted it to happen. Billy was supposed to take her home. I just needed her to talk. She saw something she wasn't meant to see." The words shook as they went. He described a night gone wrong, a meeting meant for intimidation that spiraled into panic. Emily had been witness to an illegal operation tied to their employer smuggling undocumented labor-forged identities. She'd threatened to go to the police. He couldn't let that happen. Billy panicked when she fell, he wrote. But I told him we had to finish it. I told him we'd both go to prison if she talked. He ended with a plea. "I'm sorry for what we did. I'm sorry for what I made him do. Tell her mother the light can go out now." When Eleanor read those lines, her throat closed. 24 years of silence broken not by justice but by guilt. The cold case was solved, yes, but the solution tasted like ash. 2 men, both dead, one truth finally unburied. Yet even as the evidence closed, the unease didn't fade. Because in the final paragraph of Cross's letter, one sentence stood alone, underlined twice. There were others. We weren't the only ones that night. The words burned through the paper like a fuse. There were others. We weren't the only ones that night. The sentence hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't fade. Eleanor read it again, each word pressing deeper, colder. Others? Who were they? The letter ended there. No names, no explanation, just that final haunting truth scribbled in trembling ink. David Cross was dead before police arrived. His heart had stopped hours earlier. The paramedics said it looked peaceful, but nothing about that room was peaceful. Not the stacks of photos, not the pages of unfinished confessions, not the faint sound of the sea clawing at the windows. He'd died alone, just like Emily, swallowed by silence. The investigators sealed the flat, but the story didn't end there. It couldn't. Eleanor stood by the desk staring at the last line, underlined twice, the ink almost carved into the paper. There were others. Her instincts told her it wasn't paranoia. It was a lead. She turned toward the wall above the desk. It was covered in newspaper clippings, not random, but arranged connected by red string lines, crisscrossing between victims' locations years. In the center, a circle drawn around one name, Riverside Imports Limited A Company that had gone bankrupt in 2002. The same employer Billy and David had worked for. The same warehouse where Emily Carter's life had ended. The files described it as a shipping business, but beneath that facade, investigators had once suspected illegal trafficking of goods of people. Nothing proven. Everything buried. The deeper Eleanor looked, the clearer it became. Emily hadn't just stumbled into the wrong place that night. She'd uncovered something dangerous, something worth killing for. Back at Scotland Yard, the evidence team cataloged every item from the flat. Receipts, notes, photos, coded ledger books. In one of them, Eleanor found entries marked only by initials and numbers. EC01, SR99, LM00. They looked like shipment codes, but one thing was wrong. The letters matched the initials of missing women from East London, all reported between 1999 and 2002. Victims who'd vanished under eerily similar circumstances, late-night disappearances, no witnesses, no suspects. It was as if their lives had been packed away in crates and erased from memory. She cross-checked the names. Sarah Riddell, last seen outside a train station in 1999. Laura May disappeared after leaving a nightclub in 2000. Both cases unsolved, both within 2 miles of the old Riverside warehouse. Eleanor's skin went cold. What if Emily Carter wasn't the only one buried under concrete? What if she was just the one they happened to find? The discovery hit the department like a storm. Overnight, the Carter case transformed from a single solved murder into the front door of something much darker. The media knew only fragments links to multiple disappearances possible serial offender East End cold case reopened. But inside, the task force panic brewed. Each new piece of evidence pointed to a pattern, and each pattern led back to the same shadow, the company that no longer existed, and the men who had built it. Riverside Imports. The name meant nothing to most Londoners now, but to the detectives who'd worked the docks 2 decades earlier, it brought a chill. They remembered the night raids, the hushed reports of smuggling containers arriving half-empty manifests, altered names changed. The files had gone missing years ago, transferred to an archival review that never happened. Eleanor ordered them pulled every document, every photograph, even the handwritten notes. She wanted to see everything. When the boxes arrived, half were empty, pages gone redacted, shredded. Someone had wanted the past to stay buried. Still, a few fragments remained. Among them, a customs inspection log from June 2001, the week Emily vanished. It listed a late-night shipment cleared under the initials DC and W.H. David Cross and William Hargreaves. The cargo description read Industrial Supplies Restricted Access. The destination field was left blank. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, the pieces locking into place. Emily had worked at a cafe near the docks. Regular customers from the warehouse had eaten there often. Maybe she overheard something. Maybe she saw what she shouldn't. And that night, they silenced her. But if there were others that night, as Cross claimed who were they, she dug deeper. Payroll records showed 3 additional employees on duty during that same week. 2 had since died, 1 in an accident, 1 missing. The 3rd still lived in London. His name, Gareth Mills. Former forklift operator. No criminal record, but a history of sudden job changes and cash-only contracts. Eleanor requested surveillance, but before they could act, Mills vanished. His flat cleared out overnight, his phone disconnected. The same pattern. Every lead dissolving just as she reached it. The tension inside the task force thickened. Someone was always one step ahead. When Eleanor tried to access internal case archives, her clearance was suddenly under review. Emails went unanswered. Hayes avoided her entirely. She began to feel watched not just by the media but from inside the department itself. Files she'd left on her desk were subtly rearranged. A photo she'd printed Emily smiling in sunlight was torn in half. One night, as she left headquarters, her car alarm went off without cause. Inside, on the passenger seat, a single envelope. No name, no address. Inside it, a copy of Cross's deathbed letter, but with 1 extra line added in different handwriting, "Stop digging, Shaw." You won't like what you find. She didn't sleep that night. She replayed every interview, every detail. The word others pulsed in her mind like a drumbeat. If Cross hadn't written that extra line, someone else had access to the letter. Someone who'd been inside the investigation. The implication was simple and terrifying. There was still someone alive who knew the truth. Someone inside the system. Days later, a breakthrough came not from evidence, but from an accident. A forensic technician ran one more test on the fabric of Emily's coat, an advanced chemical scan designed for trace particulates. It found something unusual: dust particles containing rare minerals used in industrial concrete sealant, not from the warehouse site, but from another construction area across town, an old factory demolished in 2002. The same company, Riverside Imports, had owned that property too. A second burial ground, perhaps. Eleanor ordered the site reopened. When the drills hit the earth, the sound was deafening. Beneath layers of gravel and rebar, cadaver dogs began to bark. Within hours, the first remains surfaced: a set of human bones bound in plastic sheeting, then another, then a third, all female, all buried within months of one another. The press swarmed, headlines exploded. London cold case uncovers mass grave police stunned by new discovery. The city reeled. 20 years of silence shattered in a single afternoon. But for Eleanor, triumph turned to dread. Because among the items recovered at the site was something personal, a badge tarnished but legible. Metropolitan Police issue. The serial number belonged to an officer who had retired in 2003, Detective Mark Hayes, her superior's brother, the one who had handled the original investigation files in 2001, the one who had been transferred shortly after the case went cold. The ground beneath her felt like it was splitting open. That night, Eleanor confronted Chief Superintendent Hayes in his office. The rain pounded outside the city, flickering through the blinds. "How long have you known?" she asked. He didn't answer, just stared, exhausted, the mask slipping. "You think this job is about truth," he finally said, voice trembling, "but truth doesn't keep order. It destroys it." He stood, walked to the window, and continued quietly. Emily wasn't supposed to die. She was supposed to disappear. Cross panicked. My brother tried to contain it. We thought we could protect the department, protect everyone. But it just kept growing. More girls, more silence. And then, it was too late. The confession wasn't official, but it was enough. Enough to understand that the rot hadn't started in the warehouse, it had started inside the badge. Eleanor left his office without a word. By morning, Hayes had resigned. By evening, he was gone. His car found by the river door, open keys still in the ignition. No body. The inquiry widened. Parliament demanded answers. The media tore at the department's credibility. Police complicity in cold case cover-up. Protesters gathered outside Scotland Yard chanting Emily's name. Margaret Carter stood among them holding her daughter's photo against the rain. "All I ever wanted was the truth," she said to cameras, "but now I wonder if London even remembers what truth looks like." Weeks passed. The graves were excavated, the victims identified, each story retold on the evening news. But the final report offered no closure, only a list of unanswered questions. Who else had been there that night? Who had buried the evidence, the bodies, the truth? And why had it taken 24 years for the silence to break? Eleanor filed her final statement and left it on her desk. In it, she wrote one line that the press would never read: "Justice doesn't sleep. It just waits for someone brave enough to wake it." She turned off the light, walked out into the cold London dawn, and didn't look back. Somewhere near the river, beneath the hum of the city, the wind still carries whispers. The night Emily Carter vanished, someone else stood in the dark, unseen, unheard. The file says the case is solved. The headlines say justice has been served. But every detective who's ever worked a cold case knows the truth. Cases don't end, they fade. And when the city sleeps, its ghosts wait for the next name, the next secret, the next voice ready to confess. And sometimes they never stop whispering. Rain drummed against the pavement that night the same way it had 24 years ago. A dull, rhythmic beat, steady and cruel, like a reminder that time was looping back on itself. Detective Ross stood in the middle of the alley where it all began, the cold light of his flashlight cutting through the mist. The walls still carried the same damp smell of iron and mold. Only now the silence had weight, the kind that presses against your ribs and makes you wish you weren't breathing so loud. The confession tape was still echoing in his head, the old man's voice trembling through the speakers. There were others. We weren't the only ones that night. The words had cracked open everything. For years, the case had been boxed, sealed, forgotten in the archives of New Scotland Yard. Now, every page felt alive again, bleeding with questions that never found their answers. Who were the others? Why had no one seen them? Why wait until death's door to speak? The tape had ended abruptly, the sound of a nurse calling his name, a long exhale, then nothing. Dead before morning. No chance for follow-up, no closure. Just a door, kicked open to more darkness. Ross turned off his flashlight. The glow of the street lamp flickered above him, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the wet concrete. He could see it. The image burned into every report: Emma Caldwell, 23, last seen leaving a pub in Shoreditch. Her laughter described as bright enough to light the whole room. 2 days later, her body was found right here, folded beside the dumpsters. Eyes open, looking straight up as if she'd seen something or someone right before the end. The rain thickened. Ross leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. He could almost hear it, the sound of her heels clicking down the alley, a man's footsteps following the scrape of leather, the whisper of fear. He'd been a rookie back then, barely a name in the department, watching senior detectives argue about motives about suspects that came and went like smoke. A decade later, all that remained was dust and silence. Until that tape. Until the dying breath of a man named Harold Pierce, a retired cab driver, lung cancer, dying in a hospice on the outskirts of London. Pierce had never been on the suspect list. Not once. He was just another face in the crowd, another name that didn't matter. But when the nurse found the small recorder under his pillow, the police thought it was a joke, until they pressed play. "I didn't kill her," the voice said, "but I was there. We were paid to move her. We thought she was just drunk. But she wasn't. She was bleeding." Then that pause, that trembling inhale. There were others. We weren't the only ones that night. Ross clenched his jaw. Paid to move her. That one line was enough to unravel the past. He called the old forensics unit, dug up the original evidence bag, a torn piece of cloth found near the body. Back then, it was dismissed as irrelevant. Too common, too contaminated. But new DNA methods were different now. Sensitive enough to pull whispers from fibers that had been silent for decades. He sent it to the lab, waiting sleepless, every result a heartbeat away. The call came 3 nights later. A female analyst voice, flat but trembling underneath Detective Ross. "You need to see this." A match. Not to Pierce, not to anyone in the old files, but to a man currently serving time for another murder, a private security contractor named Douglas Hale, convicted in 2015 for the disappearance of 2 women near Manchester. Same method, same precision, same coldness. And his employment record, a name that linked him to 2001. He'd been working night security for a construction company across from the very alley where Emma died. Ross felt the air leave his lungs. All these years, the answer had been sitting behind another set of bars, silent. But why didn't Hale ever mention her? Why didn't the prints match back then? The analyst explained partial degradation, poor storage, old contamination protocols. The science hadn't been ready. The truth had been waiting for the world to catch up. He visited Hale the next morning, escorted through the concrete corridors of HMP Belmarsh, the echo of steel doors slamming behind him. Hale was older, heavier, but his eyes, empty. Flat gray like the sky before a storm. When Ross showed him the photo, there was no flicker of surprise. Just that faint curl of the lips, not a smile, but recognition. "You took your time," he said. Ross didn't reply. The silence filled the space between them like fog. Then Hale leaned forward, his voice low. "You think I killed her. I didn't, but I know who did, and he's still out there." That was when everything tilted again. Back in the office, Ross replayed the tape, the confession, Hale's words, all threads of the same dark web. 2 men, both claiming they didn't kill her, both admitting they were there, 2 ghosts circling the same body. The question wasn't who pulled the trigger. There was no gun. It was who planned it, who watched, who stayed silent all these years. Ross looked out the window. London was still the same neon bleeding into rain, the hum of traffic, the city pretending not to remember. But now the case had a pulse again. Files were reopened, warrants were signed, old detectives called out of retirement. Every clue led to another door, another whisper. Emma's name appeared on whiteboards again, her face on evidence screens, her eyes still staring through time. At 3:14 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Static. Then a voice, faint, female, trembling. "You're looking in the wrong place, detective." It wasn't about her. The line went dead. Ross froze. The voice was older, hoarse, but familiar. He dug through the old reports, the witness list. One name stood out: Sarah Collins, Emma's roommate. She'd disappeared 6 months after the murder. Moved away, changed her number, never contacted family again. The police had written it off as trauma, someone running from grief. But now she was calling. Outside, the rain eased. The city lights glimmered against the slick streets. Ross felt it, the same chill that always comes before the truth surfaces. Somewhere out there, someone still held the missing piece. And for the first time in 2 decades, the ghosts of 2001 were awake again. The call replayed in his head all night. the voice trembling through static, the warning that cut straight through logic. It wasn't about her. What did that mean? Ross sat in his car outside the precinct, engine off, watching the condensation creep across the windshield. The city was still asleep except for him, the man, chasing echoes. Every case he'd ever worked had a pattern, a motive, a thread to pull, but this one had none. It wasn't about Emma. It was about something she stumbled into, something too big for her to survive. By morning, the rain had thinned to a cold drizzle. He pulled up the old witness reports, flipping through the brittle pages. Emma Caldwell, art student, part-time waitress, no criminal ties, no enemies. Nothing that explained the level of planning behind her death. The pathologist's notes mentioned precision, no defensive wounds, no struggle. Whoever killed her didn't fight her. They silenced her. Quick, surgical, professional. Ross opened the caseboard again, pinning Hale's mugshot next to Pierce's hospice photo. Two men who claimed to be present, neither claiming the kill. He stared at them long enough for their faces to blur into something else, symbols, not people. The connection wasn't personal. It was logistical. Paid to move her. Paid by who? He dug into the 2001 payrolls of the construction firm Hale had worked for. Dozens of subcontractors, shell companies, transfers with no invoices. The deeper he went, the colder the trail got. Until one company name came up more than once, Aurelia Holdings Limited, registered in the Isle of Man. No office, no staff, just a mailbox. Ross leaned back. Aurelia. He'd heard that name once before, years ago, buried in a corruption case involving government contracts and missing funds. It was a ghost company a front used to move money quietly. If Emma had crossed paths with them, it wasn't random. He needed to find Sarah Collins, the one person still alive who might know why Emma died. But her trail was nearly 2 decades cold. The last confirmed address was in Bristol, then gone. No job history, no bank account, no trace. Until the voice. That call proved she was watching. Hiding, maybe, or warning him off. He traced the number, disposable SIM, unregistered. But it pinged once briefly on a tower in Southwark. That was enough. He grabbed his coat, his badge, and went. The city was waking up when he arrived. Cafes opening, buses exhaling smoke into the damp air. The street where the signal hit was narrow-lined with boarded shops and a half-collapsed hostel. He showed the clerk Sarah's old photo, blonde hair, sharp jaw, a smile that looked like it had secrets. The clerk squinted, then nodded slowly. Room 12, he said. She paid cash. Came and went at night. Haven't seen her in days. Room 12 smelled like mold and cigarettes. The bed-unmade window cracked open. On the table, an old flip phone, a pack of matches, and a Polaroid photo. Emma and Sarah, arms around each other, smiling in front of a mural that said, "The city never forgets." On the back of the photo, a single sentence in messy ink. If you're reading this, they found me. Ross's stomach turned. He looked around, nothing else. No luggage, no clothes, no trace of departure. But the mirror by the bed caught his eye. In the corner, faint fingerprints smudged on the glass, 2 sets, one fresh. He called it in. Forensics arrived an hour later. While they dusted the room, Ross stood outside under the awning, the drizzle, now a steady rain again. A uniform approached him holding an evidence bag. "Sir," he said quietly. Inside was a key. Hotel-style tag. Stamped Locker 07, Waterloo Station. It was always like this, one breadcrumb leading to another, one ghost pointing to the next. Waterloo Station at rush hour was chaos. People moving in waves, voices blending into an endless hum. Ross made his way to the lower-level lockers, the metal walls lined like coffins. Number 07 sat in the corner, half hidden behind a vending machine. He slid the key in. The lock clicked. Inside, a brown envelope. No name, no return address. Just a single word, on the front, Aurelia. He opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, old, grainy, taken at night. Construction site fences, trucks, a white van parked in the shadows. And then Emma, standing outside the site holding a camera. Another photo, a man beside her, face blurred but posture unmistakable. Douglas Hale. Ross's heart pounded. Emma had been there. She'd been investigating something. Not random, not victim of chance. She'd seen something she wasn't meant to see. The last photo was the worst. A body on the ground covered in a sheet. The date scribbled on the corner, October 23rd, 2001, the night she disappeared. The photo was taken from above from someone looking down. Ross stared at it until the noise of the station vanished around him. Someone had taken this photo before the police even arrived. Someone had been watching. He drove back to headquarters. Through the endless rain, the envelope on the seat beside him like a living thing. Each photo a whisper, each face a question. He pinned them to the board, the web growing denser. Emma, Sarah, Pierce, Hale, Aurelia, the names circled again and again like a curse. As night fell, he poured himself another cup of coffee and stared at the board. The fluorescent light flickered above. For a moment, he thought he saw movement in the reflection, a shadow by the door. He turned. Nothing. Just silence. Then his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time a text. "You're getting too close, detective. Don't make the same mistake she did." Ross froze. The timestamp read 22:47, and right beneath the message an attached image. Grainy. Taken from a distance. It was him, standing by the locker at Waterloo Station. The world stopped for a second. The photo on his screen burned into his eyes, grainy, low resolution, but unmistakable. Him. Standing at the locker. Someone had been there watching, close enough to photograph, far enough to disappear. He felt the static crawl under his skin, that cold prickle you get when you realize the hunter might not be the one hunting anymore. He zoomed in, pixel by pixel. The angle came from the mezzanine above the concourse where the CCTV cameras should have been. Should have. He checked the timestamp, 22:47. He was still there at that exact time, which meant whoever sent it took the shot live. They wanted him to see it. They wanted him to know. Ross slammed the phone down, breath sharp. He called station control, demanded the CCTV footage. The techs combed through the drives, searching frame by frame. Nothing. That camera, the one overlooking the lockers, had been offline for maintenance since Monday. 3 days dark, 3 days unrecorded. Coincidence or control? He didn't believe in coincidence anymore. He pulled up the caseboard again. Emma Caldwell's smile stared back at him through the haze of cigarette smoke. Hale's smirk. Pierce's trembling confession. Sarah's Polaroid. The word Aurelia scrawled in red at the center. The case had stopped being about one dead girl. It was a system, a machine, the kind that eats people and erases the noise afterward. He ran his finger along the map pinned to the board. Shoreditch, Southwark, Waterloo, all circling one area, the old Docklands redevelopment zone, the same area where Hale's company had operated in 2001. He called the Archives Division. "I need the list of every property permit filed between 2000 and 2002 for Docklands," he said. The clerk on the other end sighed. "That'll take hours." "I'll wait," Ross said, lighting another cigarette. He watched the smoke twist in the flickering light, listened to the rain tapping against the glass like fingers trying to get in. 2 hours later, the email came through. 50 permits. One name recurring under multiple aliases, Aurelia Holdings Limited, different directors. Same address, different projects. Same pattern, all terminated abruptly, all written off as financial loss. But the sites each later tied to missing persons accidents or unsolved assaults. All quieted, all forgotten. He felt his chest tighten. This wasn't about one death. It was a network of erasure. Someone had built a business out of silence. Ross drove to the last address on the list, a derelict warehouse near Canary Wharf, now fenced off and marked for demolition. The gate creaked open under the wind. Inside, the smell hit him first, rust-oil decay. His flashlight beam sliced through the dark, catching old machinery-torn tarps, puddles reflecting the faint light like dead eyes. And then he saw it, faint letters still visible on the wall. Aurelia Contractors Ltd. Spray-painted over, half erased. He moved deeper. A desk overturned. Papers scattered. Dust thick enough to write in. He bent down, brushing aside debris. Underneath a box. Inside, old photos. construction workers' vans, faces blurred. One image froze him. Emma again, camera in hand, standing behind the same fence. Another photo, Pierce Younger in uniform, holding a clipboard. He'd been a part of the crew. He had been there that night. He flipped through the stack. A third face emerged Hale, smirking arm around another man whose face was partly shadowed. Ross tilted the photo toward the flashlight. The hairline, the jaw, familiar. He'd seen him before in another file, another case. Detective Superintendent Graham Keller, his old commanding officer. Ross's pulse roared in his ears. He sat back against the wall, the box in his lap. The edges of the world blurred. Keller had been led on the Caldwell investigation in 2001. He was the one who'd declared it a robbery gone wrong, the one who'd closed the case for lack of evidence. And there he was in the middle of the photos, smiling beside the suspects. Ross's phone buzzed again. Another message. No text this time, just a video. He pressed play. The screen filled with static, then resolved into footage, handheld, shaky, grainy. The inside of the same warehouse. Voices in the dark. A woman crying. Men arguing. And then a flash of light, the silhouette of someone being dragged. The camera turned, and for a split second Ross saw it, Keller's face. Clear, cold, commanding. "Get her in the van," he said. The video cut. Ross stood frozen, the air gone from his lungs. The timestamp on the file, October 23, 2001. He backed away slowly, the phone still in his hand. Every part of him screamed to get out. He turned toward the door and stopped. A sound echoed behind him, a faint metallic click, the sound of a camera shutter. His flashlight darted to the far end of the warehouse. A flicker of movement, a shadow disappearing behind a pillar. Ross moved closer, silent gun drawn. His footsteps echoed against the concrete. The smell of oil thickened. Then another sound, the creak of a door hinge. He spun toward it, flashlight slicing through the dark. The back door swung shut. He ran, burst into the rain. Nothing, just the hum of the city in the distance, the slow drip from the gutter. Whoever it was had vanished. Ross got back in the car, soaked, heart pounding. He set the phone on the dashboard and stared at the dark warehouse in the rearview mirror. Someone had known he'd be there. Someone who had the footage. Someone who had access to 20-year-old evidence and was still cleaning up. He drove off the wipers, struggling against the downpour. The city blurred by bridges, towers, reflections of light that looked too much like fire. He couldn't tell if the shaking in his hands was from cold or anger. When he reached the station, he stormed into internal affairs. The clerk blinked when he said Keller's name. He retired 5 years ago, she said. Moved to Devon. Ross dropped the photo on the desk. Check again. She hesitated, typed, then froze. Detective Keller died last year. Heart attack. Ross stared at her. Then, who sent me that video? The silence that followed was the kind that fills your lungs with dread. He left the office without another word. The corridor's empty except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. As he stepped into the parking lot, the street lamps flickered again, one by one, as if following him. And in the distance, beyond the rain, a voice echoed faintly in his head. It wasn't about her. He didn't know it yet, but that night that one sentence would drag him further than he'd ever imagined into the darkness that started in 2001 and never really ended. He couldn't sleep that night. The city outside his window pulsed like a living organism, restless breathing, whispering secrets through the rain. The old case files lay open on his kitchen table, pages curling at the edges, soaked with coffee stains and exhaustion. Keller. The name glared back at him from every document like a ghost refusing to die. Officially, he was gone, heart attack, Devon, cremated. But Ross had seen the footage. The voice. The face. That wasn't 20 years ago. The man in that video was older, grayer, alive. The thought clawed at him. If Keller was still alive, someone had buried the truth deep enough to fake death itself. He opened his laptop fingers, shaking, hacking through public records, pension files, death certificates. Keller's record was pristine too pristine. No next of kin, no funeral photos, no obituary beyond a 2-line notice in the Telegraph. And the death certificate, signed by a private coroner name unreadable signature, blurred on the scan. Ross leaned back, exhaling smoke toward the ceiling. Every step forward pulled him deeper into something older, colder. He thought of Emma again, the way her file began with light and ended in silence. She wasn't the only one silenced. Keller's name had been erased too, but not because he was dead, because he was still operating. Somewhere. The rain stopped near dawn. The silence that followed was unnerving, heavy, as if the city was waiting for something to happen. Ross checked his phone. A single new message. No number, just text. "Stop digging, Ross. You don't know who they were protecting." He stared at the words until they blurred. Then he looked out the window. Across the street, a black car sat idle under a broken street lamp. He watched for movement. Nothing. Just tinted glass and the slow pulse of the brake lights. He grabbed his coat badge and gun, moving quietly down the stairwell. The moment he stepped outside the car pulled away, slow, deliberate tires hissing on wet asphalt. He followed on foot. The streets were empty, the air thick with diesel. The car turned into a service lane, then vanished. Ross sprinted after it, breath ragged, heart hammering. At the corner, nothing. Just puddles and echoes. But on the ground, a small glint of metal. He crouched. A cufflink. Gold. Engraved with 2 letters AAH. Aurelia Holdings. He pocketed it, the rain beginning again, thin and cold. The street smelled like burnt oil. Whoever was behind this wasn't hiding anymore. They were watching, waiting, reminding him that he wasn't in control. Back at headquarters, the tension was thicker than smoke. Colleagues avoided eye contact. Files had been moved. His access to digital records restricted overnight. Someone inside had pulled rank. He demanded answers. The sergeant at IT shrugged, nervous. "Orders from above," he said. "Higher clearance." Ross laughed dry, bitter. Above who? No answer. Just the hum of the servers. He left before his anger broke something. In the stairwell, his phone buzzed again, another unknown number. This time, a voice message. He pressed play. A woman's voice. Calm, low. "You're not the first to go looking for her, detective." The last one didn't come back. Then, static. He froze, every nerve alert. That voice, he knew it. Sarah. He ran to his car, speeding toward Southwark. The hostel was dark when he arrived, police tape fluttering weakly in the wind. He ducked under it, flashlight cutting through the black. The room, hers, looked different now. Cleaner. Too clean. The smell of bleach burned his throat. On the bed, a single object remained. A cassette tape. Old. Label faded. He picked it up with his gloved hand. Written in marker, barely legible, Pierce 2002. He didn't wait. He drove straight to the lab, played the tape on an old recorder. The hiss filled the room first, then the voicemail, weak gasping. Pierce again. "They told us it was just a job. Move the girl. Keep quiet." But then she woke up. Started asking questions. He said she saw too much. Said she filmed everything. A cough, a long pause. "We buried it under Dock 13. The camera. We left it there." Ross's pulse quickened. Dock 13. Another old construction site, part of the Aurelia contracts. Abandoned for years. He went there before dawn. The fog rolled low over the Thames, wrapping the empty docks in ghost light. The signs were faded gates, rusted. He climbed over boots echoing against the wet boards. The air smelled of salt iron and rot. He swept the flashlight across the ground, following the skeletal outlines of cranes and containers until he saw a mound of disturbed earth near a rusted pipe. He knelt, hands shaking, digging through mud and debris until the metal edge of a camera case surfaced. He pulled it free, heavy, sealed, the hinges corroded but intact. He pried it open. Inside, an old mini-DV camcorder wrapped in plastic, the tape still inside. Back at the car, his breath fogged the windows as he powered the camcorder through an adapter. The screen flickered lines of static. Then, video. Emma Caldwell alive, holding the camera, filming herself. "If anything happens to me," she said, breathless, "it's because of what I saw. They're not building anything. They're covering something. I think they killed someone here before." Her eyes darted behind her. A noise. She turned the camera headlights. Men shouting. A figure stepping out of the light. A voice Ross recognized instantly. "Keller." The footage cut to black. Ross sat there, the rain hammering against the windshield, the faint whir of the camera still spinning. His mind reeled. Emma had caught everything to cover up the men, the connection to Aurelia. And Keller was at the center. He exhaled slowly, the weight of 24 years pressing on his chest. Every cold case has a pulse, faint but still alive. This one was screaming. He picked up his phone and dialed the number from Sarah's last call. No answer. Then, after a long silence, a message appeared on the screen. "You found the tape. Good. Now they'll come for you, too." Ross stared at it, the words burning brighter than the city lights beyond his windshield. And somewhere behind him, just outside the glass, a shadow moved. The scream of tires sliced through the rain. Ross spun around too late. Headlights flared white in the mirror, a metallic roar closing fast. He dove aside as the car tore past, missing him by inches, splintering his side mirror and showering the pavement in shards of glass. The vehicle didn't stop. No license plate, no hesitation. Just gone. He crouched behind his own car, breathing hard, gun drawn. The air was thick with petrol and fear. Whoever was behind that wheel had meant to end this right there on Dock 13. He waited a full minute listening. Nothing. Only the whisper of the Thames and the low hum of the city beyond. When he finally stood, his hands were trembling not from the cold, but from the realization that they knew exactly where he was, and that meant someone close had talked. He drove through the city like a ghost, headlights off through side streets, circling twice before pulling into a dim underground car park beneath a derelict office building. He shut off the engine, opened the glove box, and stared at the camera lying there. That little box held more truth than 2 decades of police reports. If he turned it in officially, it would vanish before sunrise. If he kept it, he'd be hunted. He laughed quietly. So that's the choice. Upstairs, the building's old surveillance office still had power. He plugged the camcorder into a dusty monitor, rewound the tape, and watched it again, frame by frame. This time he caught something he hadn't before, a reflection. In one corner of the frame behind Emma and the men, a mirror caught another figure standing apart. Tall. Suit. Watching. The face was blurred, but the outline was unmistakable. Commissioner Hayes. Ross froze. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thinner. Hayes, the man who'd reopened the case last month, who'd warned him not to chase ghosts. He'd been there, 24 years ago, watching Emma's final moments. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. He staggered back from the screen, palms pressed against his temples. Every late-night meeting, every confidential file transfer, Hayes had been steering him straight into a trap. Then the building lights flickered. Once, twice. Someone had cut the main feed. Ross grabbed the tape, shoved it into his coat pocket, and ran for the stairwell. The echo of boots followed 2 floors below, measured deliberate, not rushing. Professional. He moved faster out into the alley, blending with the shadows. The rain came harder now, blurring the neon signs overhead. He ducked into a closed market stall, waited, breath slow. A black SUV rolled by at the far end of the street, windows tinted, no plates. He stayed still until the sound faded. Then from his coat his phone buzzed again. A text from Sarah. He knows. Don't go home. Meet me at 2 a.m. Victoria Pier. He stared at it, the words sharp as a blade. She was still alive, still running. But was she bait or salvation? At 1:58, Ross parked near the pier. The fog swallowed everything beyond 5 meters. Streetlights glowed like dying embers. He walked the wooden path toward the water, every step creaking like a warning. Then a figure emerged through the mist. Sarah. Hood up, trembling, clutching a folder. "I didn't know who else to call," she whispered. "They found me after you left. I think they were looking for this." She handed him the folder. Inside, printouts, bank transfers, offshore accounts, all under Aurelia Holdings. The money trails led back to construction contracts, and to one name, Commissioner Arthur Hayes. He funded it, she said. Keller wasn't rogue, he was hired. Ross felt the world tilt. 24 years of false leads, missing witnesses, suicides that weren't suicides. All of it choreographed from inside the department. Before he could speak, a sound cut through the fog, a click metallic final. A red dot appeared on Sarah's coat. "Run," Ross shouted. The shot came half a second later. Sarah fell against him, eyes wide, a small crimson bloom spreading through her chest. The folder hit the ground papers, scattering like snow. Ross dropped to his knees, pressing his hand against the wound. She tried to speak, blood bubbling at her lips. Doc. 13. There's another. Then silence. Ross looked up, fury blinding. The fog swallowed everything. He fired blindly toward the rooftops, 3 shots. Echoes rolled over the water. Nothing moved. Sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder. Police. Too soon. Too convenient. He backed away. Heart pounding, grabbed the folder and ran into the labyrinth of warehouses beyond the pier. The rain washed the blood from his hands, but not from his mind. He'd lost the only ally left. And now the entire department would brand him a murderer. Ross knew what that meant. He wasn't chasing the cold case anymore. He was the cold case. The city didn't sleep that night. Police scanners crackled with alerts, officer down shots fired, unknown suspect fleeing the South Docks. Every channel echoed his name. Detective Samuel Ross, armed, dangerous. The words felt like a death sentence whispered through the static. He moved through the wet alleys like a hunted animal, the echo of sirens bouncing off the brick walls. His breath came in shallow bursts, mist rising around him. Somewhere above a helicopter cut the fog with its beam searching. He pressed himself against the cold metal of a dumpster, heart pounding. In his coat, the folder still felt warm, pulsing with the weight of what it carried. Sarah's last words replayed in his mind, Doc 13. Another, what? Another tape, another body, another truth too dangerous to live with. By dawn, the rain had thinned to drizzle. He slipped through the side door of an abandoned pub near Whitechapel. Inside, the floor was dusted with ash and glass. Old posters clung to the walls like ghosts that refused to leave. He dropped into a chair, exhaled, and spread the folder open under the pale light that leaked through the blinds. Bank transfers, hidden accounts, shell companies stacked like mirrors facing each other, Aurelia Holdings, Blackridge Consultancy, B and H Trust. And at the center of every connection, Arthur Hayes. Commissioner, decorated, celebrated, untouchable. Ross traced the lines with a shaking finger. Hayes had built an empire out of the shadows, bribes, falsified evidence, blackmail. Emma's disappearance hadn't been random. She'd stumbled on something buried deep in the contracts for the city's redevelopment, and when she tried to expose it, they silenced her. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, laughter bubbling up from somewhere hollow. 24 years ago, he'd been a rookie on that same case, told to keep his head down, follow orders. And all along, he'd been working for the man who orchestrated it. The laugh turned into a growl. Not anymore. He reached for his phone. One number he hadn't deleted, Tommy Greaves, a retired journalist who'd once been the only reporter willing to question the department's heroic stories. Ross sent a single text, need to meet. Truth about Hayes. Tonight. Same bar. He didn't wait for a reply. Outside, the morning fog had turned silver. He walked to the river's edge, every step pulling him closer to the truth or his grave. He stopped at Dock 13 again. The water lapped gently against the pilings, dark and indifferent. He stared at the spot where he'd been attacked, where the car had tried to erase him. Then he noticed fresh tire marks on the wet concrete. Not from last night. New. The same SUV, maybe. Someone had been here again recently. He followed the tracks around the side of a shipping warehouse. A door hung open, light flickering inside. He stepped in slow. The air smelled of oil and salt and something faintly metallic blood. On the floor, lying between 2 crates, was a man. His eyes stared up at the ceiling, glazed with shock. A badge glimmered on his chest. Detective Rowan, Internal Affairs. One of Hayes's men. Ross knelt, checking for a pulse. Nothing. The man's throat had been cut clean, but in his hand, clutched tight, was a small object half-burned, blackened with soot. A USB drive? Ross pried it loose. No markings, no label. But next to the body, in smudged letters written with blood, 2 words stood out on the concrete floor. He knows. A sound echoed behind him, a door creaking open. He spun, gun raised. But it wasn't a cop. It was Greaves, the journalist, gray-bearded, wearing a worn trench coat and the same skeptical stare he'd always had. "Jesus," Ross Greaves muttered, stepping over the body. "You've made quite a mess." Ross lowered his gun just slightly. "You got my message." "I did, and the department's got your face plastered all over the morning news. They're calling you a traitor, a murderer, and a disgrace. Whatever you found better be worth dying for." Ross held up the USB. "It will be." They drove to Greaves's flat, a cramped upper floor above a pawn shop. Curtains-drawn walls lined with old news clippings and broken cameras. The smell of coffee and old ink filled the air. Greaves booted up his laptop, plugged in the drive, and waited. The screen blinked to life. Dozens of folders. Dates ranging from 1998 to 2024. Names of victims, case numbers, photos, signed orders, payments, some marked closed, others ongoing. Every file tied back to a single header, Operation Halo. Ross scrolled through the files, his jaw tightening. The operation wasn't police work, it was cover-up management. Every scandal, every disappearance that might threaten the department's elite circle had been buried under the same code name. Then they opened one video file, time-stamped the 12th of September 2001. The frame was grainy, the angle tilted. But the image was clear enough. Emma Carter tied to a chair in a dim room. Hayes's voice calm, smooth, commanding off camera. "You could have walked away, Emma. You could have had your promotion. Instead, you chose this." Her voice shaking but defiant. "The city deserves to know. People will find out." Hayes sighed. "They'll never find you." The screen cut to black. Ross slammed a fist against the table, the impact rattling the laptop. Greaves just stared pale, whispering, "My God." He really did it. Ross leaned closer, eyes burning. "We release this now. To every outlet, every feed, every journalist who still has a spine." But Greaves didn't move. He was looking past Ross out the window. "Sam, they're already here." Ross turned. Outside, black SUVs lined the street. Men in plain clothes moved toward the entrance, headsets glinting in the rain. Greaves shut the laptop, stuffed it into a backpack, and shoved it at Ross. "Go, I'll buy you time." Ross hesitated. "Tommy, go." A crash downstairs, the front door kicked in. Greaves grabbed his revolver, eyes hard. Ross bolted through the back, down the narrow fire escape landing in a maze of alleyways. Shouts echoed behind him, followed by gunfire. He ran until the noise faded, until the only sound left was his heartbeat and the hiss of the rain. He ducked under a bridge, caught his breath, pulled out the laptop. It was cracked, flickering, but still running. The screen blinked one last time and a new message appeared, unsent but queued for transmission. Recipient Internal Affairs National Crime Agency. 42 press contacts. Subject, Operation Halo. Evidence. Status, pending send. The connection bar blinked red, no signal. Ross looked out over the dark river, the city lights flickering across the surface. Somewhere out there, Hayes was watching, waiting for the last loose end to disappear. But Ross wasn't done. Not yet. The laptop screen glowed faintly beneath the bridge rain, dripping off the metal above in slow, rhythmic taps. The send button stayed red, stubbornly unresponsive. No signal, no network, just static interference, like the city itself was holding its breath. Ross clenched his jaw. He needed height signal, a place to broadcast before Hayes's people triangulated him. The laptop's clock blinked 03:47 a.m. The streets were empty, but not quiet. London never was. Somewhere beyond the river, sirens wept and the low growl of engines moved through the mist like wolves circling a wounded deer. He ran. Across puddles, through narrow back lanes, past shuttered markets and flickering CCTV cameras. The city was watching him, every eye a lens, every silence a trap. At the end of Rookery Lane stood an old communications tower, condemned, rusted, surrounded by chain-link fencing. He climbed over it, boots slipping on wet metal. The air grew colder as he ascended the wind, carrying the smell of iron and rain. From up there, London stretched below like a dark circuit board, the Thames, a black vein pulsing through its heart. He balanced the laptop on a ledge, tethered his phone's hotspot, and watched the signal bar flicker to life. 1 bar, then 2. Enough. He hit send. For a second, nothing happened. Then the progress bar crawled forward slowly, painfully 10%, 25%, 40%. Ross wiped the rain from the screen with a shaking hand, muttering to himself. Come on. Come on. The laptop beeped. Upload interrupted. Connection lost. Then, a second later, a message flashed across the display. Unauthorized transfer detected. Connection terminated by remote. They'd found him. From below, headlights cut through the fog. 3 vehicles. Men with flashlights moving fast, weapons drawn. Hayes's men, again, efficient surgical. They'd traced the signal. Ross grabbed the laptop, slung it over his shoulder, and moved down the opposite side of the tower, sliding on the slick rungs boots, hitting the ground hard. He sprinted into the labyrinth of warehouses behind the industrial line, every shadow a possible target, every light a threat. Gunfire shattered the night. Bullets ripped through corrugated metal. Sparks danced across the wet pavement. Ross dove behind a crate, returned fire once, twice, just to slow them down. He knew he couldn't win a gunfight, not against trained agents. He reached the end of the dockyard and froze. The pier was blocked patrol boats on the river floodlights sweeping the water. He looked around. There was nowhere left to go. A voice echoed through the loudspeaker comm, measured too familiar. Detective Ross, it's over. Put the weapon down. You've done enough damage. Hayes. Ross raised his eyes. There, at the end of the pier, stood the commissioner himself. Rain slicked across his gray hair, his long coat fluttering in the wind. He looked almost regal, like a man about to deliver a eulogy, not an arrest. Ross shouted over the wind, "You killed her! You killed Emma Carter and every name on those files." Hayes stepped closer, unbothered by the aim of Ross's gun. "You still don't understand, do you? Emma wasn't a victim. She was a liability. She chose the wrong side. And now you have, too." Ross's finger tightened on the trigger. "You've been using the badge to hide murder." "No," Hayes said quietly. "I've been using it to protect order. Sometimes the city needs its monsters to keep the rest of you safe." Behind him, more agents appeared, guns raised. Hayes gestured for them to hold. "You can still walk away, Sam. Hand over the drive the files, and I'll make sure your record stays clean. You'll vanish a quiet end, no martyrdom." Ross laughed bitterly. "You think I care about my record?" He lifted the laptop. "It's too late. The truth's already out." Hayes's smile didn't waver. "No, it isn't. You really think I'd leave the network unmonitored? Every file you tried to send is already gone." Ross's heart sank. "You can't bury it all." "I already have." The sound came first a click from the shadows, then from somewhere above a faint hum. Ross looked up. A drone hovered silently overhead, a small red light blinking beneath it. Before he could react, the drone fired. The explosion wasn't large, but the shockwave was brutal. The pier splintered. Ross was thrown backward, crashing through a railing, his body slamming into the freezing water below. Darkness. Pressure. The cold gripped him like claws. He sank deeper, lungs screaming. The laptop slipped from his hands, spinning away into the depths. He kicked upward, desperate for air, for light, for anything. His hand broke the surface. He gasped, coughing, grabbing onto a floating piece of wood. Above him, the pier burned fragments, falling into the water like rain. Hayes stood at the edge, watching. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that flicker of distance, a silent understanding. Neither would stop until one of them was erased. Ross let the current take him. The river carried him away into the underbelly of the city where the lights faded and the world went silent. He washed ashore miles downstream on the edge of a forgotten canal. Shivering, bleeding, he crawled onto the bank, coughing up river water. And the laptop was gone. Everything gone. But in his coat pocket, soaked but intact, the small black USB drive still clung to his palm. He looked at it, blinking through the fog, and laughed weakly. The last piece, the last truth. He stumbled towards a faint glow of streetlights in the distance. Somewhere there were still journalists. There were still voices that couldn't be bought. Dawn crawled over London like a slow confession. Pale light seeping through fog thick with exhaust and the ghost of rain. The city stirred indifferent, unaware that the truth about its protectors was bleeding quietly through its veins. Samuel Ross moved through the waking streets in a haze of exhaustion and resolve, his coat dripping river water, his steps uneven but relentless. Every window reflected a man half alive, hunted, but not yet beaten. In his pocket, the USB drive pulsed against his chest the last heartbeat of a dead woman's truth. He ducked into a small cafe off the main road, the kind that opened before sunrise for cab drivers and factory workers. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air. He sat near the back eyes on the door, trying to look like someone who still belonged in the world. His hands shook as he pulled out the USB wrapped in a damp handkerchief. One wrong move, one wrong face through that door, and it would all end here. A waitress approached, middle-aged, kind eyes dulled by early mornings. "You all right, love?" Ross forced a smile. "Just tired." She nodded, poured him coffee, didn't ask more. The kindness stung worse than any bullet. He opened his phone, still cracked from the fall, and searched for one name that hadn't yet betrayed him, Eleanor Shaw. Investigative journalist once suspended for refusing to drop a corruption story about the Metropolitan Police. Rumor had it she still worked out of an underground paper called The Ledger, publishing what others were too afraid to touch. He typed a message, truth, about Emma Carter. Operation Halo. "I have proof. Meet me. No police." He hit send. The message status blinked delivered. Then nothing. Minutes dragged by. The cafe's clock ticked loud enough to feel like a countdown. Then his phone buzzed. A single reply. 2 hours, old printing plant, Mile End. Come alone. He left cash on the table and stepped back into the cold. The morning traffic was beginning to hum. Buses, groaning engines coughing to life, people heading to work oblivious to how close their city had come to swallowing another truth. He walked to the back streets toward Mile End, cutting through alleys still slick with rain. Every camera above him felt like a sniper's eye. Every stranger's glance lingered a second too long. He crossed under the railway bridge where graffiti bled across the walls like angry scars. Then he saw it, the old printing plant. Boarded windows, rusted gates, a sign barely legible through years of decay. Merivale, Presses, 1946. The front door was ajar. He stepped inside. Dust. Silence. The air smelled of old ink and mold. Faded newspapers littered the floor, headlines screaming from another lifetime. Corruption denied, police cleanup, underway, truth comes at a cost. A voice came from the shadows. You made it. Eleanor Shaw emerged from the dim trench coat, buttoned hair tied back, camera slung around her neck. Her eyes were sharp, searching him the way a surgeon studies a wound. You look like hell. Ross managed to smirk. I've had better nights. Do you have it? He held up the drive. Everything. Proof Hayes killed her. Proof he's been running a cover-up operation for decades. She took it carefully, like a priest handling a relic. You realize if this is real, the city will burn. That's the point. She plugged the drive into her laptop, the old machine whirring to life. Folders filled the screen names, payments recordings. She scrolled, fast eyes widening. My God, this is huge. This could bring down half the department. Ross leaned against a broken press, breathing shallow. Emma tried to expose it. They buried her for it. I won't let them bury her again. Before she could answer, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then the power cut completely. Silence. Eleanor froze. They found us. The front door burst open, the crash of boots, the metallic click of safeties released. Flashlights sliced through the dark beams, dancing across dust and paper. Ross grabbed Eleanor's hand, pulling her toward the back. There's a loading exit. Go. Gunfire erupted, shredding the walls, echoing through the vast hollow space. They ducked behind a press machine, shards of metal pinging around them. Eleanor clutched the laptop to her chest, terrified, but unflinching. Why are they shooting? I thought they'd want the evidence. Ross gritted his teeth. They don't need it. They just need us gone. He returned fire, 2 quick bursts. One man went down. Another advanced from the side. Ross caught a glimpse of his badge, government issue. This wasn't just Hayes's men anymore. The entire web had come alive. They made it to the rear door. Locked. Ross kicked it once, twice. It gave way, splintering under the pressure. Cold air flooded in. They stumbled into the alley, sprinting through the rain as more shots rang out behind them. A van screeched around the corner. For a heartbeat, Ross thought it was another ambush until the window rolled down. Get in. Greaves. blood on his sleeve, face pale but alive. They jumped indoors, slamming shut as the van tore off down the road. Ross looked at him stunned. I thought, "You thought wrong," Greaves rasped. "They got my place, but not me. And you, my friend, have just declared war." Eleanor sat in the back, typing furiously, connecting cables, her laptop's screen flickering back to life. "If I can get a connection, I can upload everything to mirrored servers. Once it's out, they can't erase it." Ross nodded. "Do it." Greaves looked through the mirror. "They're on us." Headlights appeared behind them, 2 black SUVs closing fast. The van roared down Commercial Road, weaving through early traffic. Bullets shattered the rear window. Eleanor screamed but kept typing. Ross grabbed the wheel as Greaves reloaded. "We need a signal boost." Eleanor's fingers flew. "There's one spot, Canary Wharf. If we can reach the tower, I can finish the upload." "Then hold on." The van skidded around corners, tires screaming against wet asphalt. Ahead, the skyline loomed, glass towers piercing the dawn. Behind, the city's corruption chased them like a tidal wave. Ross glanced back at Eleanor, who was lit by the glow of the laptop, defiant, unstoppable. "If we make it," he said, "make sure they remember her name." She looked up at eyes fierce. "They will." As they sped toward Canary Wharf, sirens blared, helicopters whirled overhead, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the storm clouds. The city was awake now, and it was watching. The truth was coming whether it wanted to or not. The van tore through the streets, every heartbeat synced with the roar of engines and the staccato rhythm of approaching sirens. Ross gripped the wheel like his life depended on it, because it did. Behind them, the black SUVs pressed closer, their tinted windows reflecting the morning sun and the promise of relentless pursuit. Eleanor's fingers danced over the keyboard, typing lines of code faster than Ross could follow. "I'm bypassing the firewalls, mirroring the drive across 6 servers worldwide. Once it's done, it'll be impossible to erase." "Then make it fast," Ross said, glancing in the rearview mirror. A hail of bullets shattered the van's side panel. Sparks flew, the metal groaning under each impact. Greaves returned fire with his pistol, suppressing but not stopping the chase. Ross swore, swerving sharply, sending the SUVs skidding across lanes. He glanced up at the skyline, Canary Wharf gleaming, towering, a monolith of the city's wealth and power. At its base was the communications tower, abandoned and half-forgotten yet standing, their only hope. The van skidded into an alley, tires biting the wet asphalt. Ross slammed it into a narrow service ramp leading up to the tower. They leapt from the van and began the climb, the first rays of sunlight catching on rusted beams and broken cables. Behind them, the SUVs skidded to a stop. Figures spilled out, moving with surgical precision, guns raised. Inside the tower, the wind howled, slicing through broken windows. Eleanor set up her laptop atop the control console, cables snaking around her like veins. "This is it. If I finish the upload, the truth goes public in minutes." Ross positioned himself near the entrance, shotgun raised. "You've got 3 minutes. I'll hold them off." The attackers advanced, moving silently, almost inhumanly. Hayes' men. They were calm, methodical, merciless. Ross fired once, twice. A man went down. Another lunged at him. He swung the butt of his shotgun, hearing bones crack. Outside, more SUVs arrived, cutting off escape. The walls of the tower seemed to close in, but Eleanor's fingers never paused. Her eyes never left the screen. "Almost. They're 95%. Done," she panted. Then the door behind Ross burst open. A familiar figure stepped through haze, coats flapping in the wind, face calm, collected, untouchable. He raised a hand. "Samuel, it doesn't have to end this way." Ross's teeth clenched. "It's over, Hayes. You can't bury this." Hayes smiled. Cold. "I already have, twice. And yet here you are holding the last piece. You think you control it. You think you understand." "Don't underestimate me," Ross said. Hayes laughed softly. "You've been chasing shadows for 24 years. Emma, Sarah, everyone. You've been pieces on a board you barely see, and now you forced my hand." He nodded to his men. They advanced, but before they could reach Ross, the tower's mainframe lights flickered. Eleanor shouted, "Done, upload complete." Ross didn't need to see the screens to know the truth was out. Every secret, every file, every video of Emma Pierce Keller Hayes himself mirrored across servers worldwide accessible to journalists, authorities, the public. The city would never be the same. Hayes's calm face faltered for the first time. No, this isn't possible. The men hesitated, realizing the fight was futile. Sirens in the distance were no longer empty threats. The authorities had been alerted, and with the mirrored evidence, the leverage Hayes held was gone. Ross seized the moment. It's over. Hayes stepped back, eyes darting, calculating. Then he smiled again, a final, chilling curve of the lips. It's never over. Ross didn't respond. Instead, he lowered his gun, exhaling, listening to the sound of the city outside, the same city that had been complicit, silent waiting. Eleanor closed her laptop, exhaustion washing over her. It's done. Everyone will see the truth now. Greaves, leaning against a support beam, nodded slowly. It's bigger than any of us imagined. They'll try to fight, but the evidence is out there. This time, it sticks. Ross stared out the broken window at the sun rising over London, piercing fog and steel alike. Emma's face flashed in his mind, her defiance, her courage. He whispered, barely audible over the wind, "We did it. For you." Hayes, back outside, disappeared into the morning shadows, his empire crumbling, but his presence lingering like a poison in the air. The city breathed again, uneasy but alive, with secrets exposed and justice finally finding its voice. Ross felt the weight lift slightly enough to know that while some ghosts would always remain tonight, the cold case that haunted London for 24 years had finally been solved. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the city, the echoes of the past whispered one last time, "Truth cannot be buried forever."